The first hospital went dark at 2:17 a.m. on January 9th. Not literally dark, the lights stayed on. But every computer screen in St. Michael's Medical Center in Newark went black. Electronic health records vanished. Medication dispensing systems locked. CT scanners stopped mid-procedure. Ventilators switched to manual mode. The digital nervous system of a 600-bed hospital flatlined in 11 seconds. The IT team thought it was a localized system crash. They were wrong. By 2:31 a.m., 9 hospitals across New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York reported identical failures. By 2:54 a.m., the number reached 47. By 3:18 a.m., 218 hospitals in 11 states were operating without electronic systems during the worst flu season in 15 years. 89,000 patients were in those hospitals when the systems died. 1,200 were in intensive care. 4,800 were on ventilators. 2,200 were in surgery. 890 were in active labor and delivery. None of them knew that their medical records, treatment plans, and life support monitoring had just been erased from every screen in their hospitals. The attack vector was elegant and devastating. For 6 months, malware had been dormant in the electronic health record system used by 218 hospitals across the eastern United States. The malware wasn't inside hospital networks. It was inside the cloud infrastructure of MedConnect Solutions, a major EHR vendor serving 840,000 patients daily. EHR systems are the digital foundation of modern medicine. They store patient histories, allergies, current medications, lab results, treatment plans, and real-time vital signs. Doctors prescribe medications through EHR systems. Nurses document treatments through EHR systems. Pharmacies verify drug interactions through EHR systems. Surgical teams reference patient data through EHR systems. When the EHR system dies, medicine doesn't stop. It reverts to analog mode. Paper charts, verbal orders, manual calculations, memory and guesswork. It's not impossible, but it's slow, error-prone, and dangerous. And during flu season, slow and dangerous becomes lethal. January 9th was day 23 of a severe influenza outbreak. The H3N2 strain was hitting elderly and immunocompromised populations hard. Hospital admissions were running 340% above normal. ICU beds were at 96% capacity. Emergency departments were overloaded. Staff were exhausted. The 218 hospitals hit by the attack were already operating at crisis levels. And then their digital infrastructure vanished. At 2:17 a.m., nurses at St. Michael's Medical Center were monitoring 47 ICU patients on electronic dashboards. Each dashboard showed real-time vital signs, ventilator settings, medication drips, and alert thresholds. When the screens went black, those monitoring systems didn't fail, they just became invisible. Ventilators continued breathing for patients. IV pumps continued delivering medications. But the nurses couldn't see which pumps were running, at what rates, or when they would run empty. They couldn't see which patients were stable and which were deteriorating. They couldn't access medication lists to check for dangerous interactions. They had to physically visit each patient, manually check each machine, and write everything down on paper. 47 ICU patients, 2 nurses on duty. At 2 minutes per patient for a complete check, that's 94 minutes for one full round. But some patients needed constant monitoring. Some were actively dying. The nurses had to choose who to check first. And that meant choosing who to check last. The same scenario was playing out in 218 hospitals, 1,400 ICU patients, roughly 3,500 nurses on night shift. The ratio was already dangerous before the attack. 1 nurse covering 4 ICU patients is survivable but suboptimal. Now those nurses had to monitor patients without digital tools, document everything manually, and coordinate care using paper notes. The error rate was going to spike. And during flu season, errors are fatal. But ICU patients weren't the only ones at risk. The attack's timing was calculated to maximize damage during the most vulnerable operational period. The night shift, when staffing is minimal and patient volume still high. In operating rooms across 218 hospitals, 89 surgical procedures were in progress when the systems failed. Surgeons lost access to patient records mid-procedure. Anesthesiologists couldn't verify medication allergies or review previous anesthesia complications. Surgical teams couldn't access preoperative imaging or lab work. Most surgeries continued. Once a patient is open, you can't stop, but the teams were operating blind. A patient's imaging might show an anatomical variation that changes surgical approach. An allergy to a specific anesthetic could cause cardiac arrest. A recent lab result showing low platelet count could mean unstoppable bleeding. Without EHR access, surgical teams had to rely on verbal reports from nurses who were scrambling through paper records. If those records existed, for patients transferred from other facilities, often the only records were digital, and those were gone. Estimated surgical complication risk increase, 40% in the first hour after system failure. In emergency departments, the crisis was even more acute. EDs depend on rapid information flow. A patient arrives with chest pain. The system pulls up their cardiac history, previous EKGs, current medications, known drug allergies. Treatment decisions happen in minutes. Without EHR access, those minutes become 20-minute searches through filing cabinets for paper records that might not exist. On January 9th, the 218 affected hospitals had 8,000 to 900 patients in emergency departments when the systems died. Most were flu cases, high fever, respiratory distress, dehydration. The standard treatment protocol involves checking the EHR for medical history, allergies, and contraindications before prescribing antivirals, antibiotics, or IV fluids. Without EHR access, ED physicians had three options: delay treatment while searching for paper records, treat based on patient verbal history alone, or make educated guesses. Delaying treatment in severe flu cases increases mortality. Treating without full history risks allergic reactions, drug interactions, or contraindicated medications. All three options carry significant risk, and ED physicians had to choose one for each of 8,900 patients. The medication risks were particularly severe. Modern pharmaceuticals are powerful and specific, and often dangerous if combined incorrectly. A patient taking blood thinners can't receive certain pain medications without risking fatal bleeding. A patient with kidney disease needs reduced dosages of most drugs. A patient allergic to penicillin can die from a single dose of related antibiotics. EHR systems flag these interactions automatically. Without the system, physicians rely on patient recall, assuming patients know all their medications, remember all their allergies, and understand which conditions are relevant. Most patients don't. Projected medication error rate without EHR verification: 12-18 errors per 1,000 medication orders. With 89,000 patients in 218 hospitals, that's 1 to 1,600 medication errors in the first 24 hours. Fatal error rate, approximately 8 to 12% of medication errors. Estimated additional deaths from medication errors alone: 8,892 patients in the first day. But medication errors were just one failure mode. The EHR shutdown cascaded into every aspect of hospital operations. Laboratory systems couldn't report results. When a lab runs blood work, the results go directly into the EHR. Without it, labs printed results and tried to call physicians, but with 89,000 patients across 218 hospitals, phone systems were instantly overloaded. Critical lab results, showing kidney failure, internal bleeding, or cardiac damage, sat on printers while patients deteriorated. Radiology departments couldn't access previous imaging for comparison. A chest X-ray showing pneumonia looks different if you know the patient had lung surgery last year. A CT scan showing a brain bleed means something different if you know the patient fell 2 days ago. Without historical imaging, radiologists made diagnoses in a vacuum. Pharmacy systems couldn't verify prescriptions or check inventory. Pharmacists couldn't see what medications patients were currently taking. They couldn't flag dangerous interactions. They couldn't confirm dosages were appropriate for patient weight and kidney function. They had to trust that physicians ordering medications had complete information, which they didn't because they couldn't access the EHR either. The entire hospital system was failing simultaneously across 218 facilities, and then the ventilator crisis began. At 3:47 a.m., 90 minutes into the system failure, hospitals started reporting ventilator alerts. Not mechanical failures, the ventilators were working. But modern ventilators are smart devices. They adjust breathing parameters based on patient response, alert staff when patients are ready to breathe independently, and document every breath digitally in the EHR. Without EHR connectivity, ventilators switched to standalone mode. They continued breathing for patients, but the monitoring and adjustment features were degraded. Respiratory therapists had to manually check each ventilator, adjust settings based on physical assessment rather than trending data, and document everything on paper. 4,800 patients were on ventilators across 218 hospitals. Roughly 600 respiratory therapists on night shift. Each therapist was now responsible for 8 ventilated patients requiring hourly monitoring. In flu season, many of those patients were rapidly deteriorating, their lungs filling with fluid, oxygen levels dropping, ventilator settings needing constant adjustment. Without digital monitoring, deterioration became invisible until a patient went into respiratory arrest. And in a hospital with 20-30 ventilated patients, missing one patient's decline for 30 minutes was statistically certain. Projected ventilator-associated deaths from monitoring failure. 65 patients in the first 12 hours. At 4:12 a.m., nearly 2 hours into the crisis, hospital administrators across 218 facilities were making impossible decisions. Continue operating without digital systems, accepting elevated risk and increased mortality. Or declare internal disasters, stop accepting new patients, and transfer current patients to unaffected hospitals. The transfer option was unrealistic. 89,000 patients can't be moved on short notice. Many were too unstable for transport, and nearby hospitals were already at capacity due to flu season. Transferring even 10% of the patient load would overwhelm every hospital within 50 miles. The only option was to keep operating, blind, slow, and dangerous. But the attackers weren't finished. At 4:18 a.m., the second wave hit. The hospitals that had lost EHR access now lost their backup paper systems. Not physically, the file room still existed, but the malware, which had been sitting dormant in hospital networks while pretending to only attack the cloud EHR system, activated its secondary payload. Hospital file management systems, the databases that tracked which paper records existed, where they were stored, and what they contained, were wiped. Suddenly, hospitals couldn't even find their paper backups. Medical records from the past 15 years existed somewhere in filing rooms. But without the index database, locating a specific patient's chart required physically searching thousands of files. For new patients arriving at emergency departments, there were no records at all. For existing patients, the records existed but were effectively lost. The attack had severed both digital and analog information systems simultaneously. This was the true sophistication of the attack. Not just destroying current capabilities, but eliminating fallback options. At 4:31 a.m., casualty projections were becoming clear. If EHR systems remained offline for 24 hours, estimated additional deaths: 1,200 patients from medication errors, monitoring failures, delayed treatments, and surgical complications. If systems remained offline for 48 hours, 2,400, 3,600 additional deaths. If systems remained offline for a week, 12,000, 18,000 additional deaths as the flu epidemic overwhelmed hospitals operating in analog mode. 89,000 patients in 218 hospitals. 1 in 8 wouldn't survive a week-long system outage, and the attackers had designed the malware to make recovery as difficult as possible. They hadn't just encrypted data, they'd corrupted backup systems, poisoned restoration points, and embedded logic bombs that would trigger if recovery attempts were detected. Standard cybersecurity protocol for ransomware attacks. Isolate infected systems, restore from backups, rebuild clean. Estimated recovery time for a typical hospital ransomware incident, 2-4 weeks. But this wasn't typical. This was 218 hospitals simultaneously, and the backup systems were compromised. Recovery timeline, unknown. At 4:47 a.m., the situation was critical. Hospitals were operating in crisis mode with elevated mortality. Recovery appeared impossible, and the attackers sent their ransom demand, $50 million in cryptocurrency. Payment within 12 hours, or the encryption keys would be destroyed, making data recovery impossible. Hospital administrators faced a brutal calculation: pay the ransom and potentially restore systems within hours, or refuse and accept that hundreds, possibly thousands of patients would die while IT teams attempted recovery that might take weeks. The ransom demand was designed to create this exact dilemma. 50 million was large enough to be devastating, but small enough to be achievable. 218 hospitals could pool resources. Insurance might cover it. It was the economically rational choice, but paying ransoms funds future attacks. It signals that hospitals are lucrative targets. It incentivizes attackers to strike again. The moral calculus was impossible. Pay and save lives now, but encourage future attacks that would kill more people later. Or refuse, accept immediate deaths, but avoid funding the next attack. At 4:47 a.m., hospital administrators didn't know they had a third option, because at 2:31 a.m., 14 minutes after the first hospital went dark, NSA cyber defense systems had detected the attack. The detection came from network traffic analysis. When 218 hospitals lose connectivity to a major cloud EHR provider simultaneously, the data flow pattern is distinctive. Normal system failures are gradual, localized, and show diagnostic traffic as IT teams investigate. This failure was instant, widespread, and followed by complete silence. Silence is the signature of a coordinated attack. Within 8 minutes, NSA analysts had identified the compromised EHR cloud infrastructure. Within 19 minutes, they'd isolated the malware command servers. Within 34 minutes, they'd mapped the attack architecture and identified the kill switch, a hard-coded encryption key attackers kept for their own administrative access. But knowing how to stop an attack is different from stopping it. The malware was already deployed. The encryption was already active. Simply shutting down the command servers wouldn't restore the systems. It would just lock the attackers out along with the hospitals. NSA needed the decryption keys, which meant infiltrating the attacker's command infrastructure without being detected. At 3:45 a.m., while hospitals were descending into analog crisis, NSA cyber operators were deep inside the attacker's network. They couldn't seize the decryption keys directly. That would alert the attackers, who would then destroy the keys and make recovery impossible. Instead, NSA had to silently copy the key database while leaving the attackers convinced they still had control. It took 47 minutes of surgical digital infiltration. At 4:32 a.m., 15 minutes before the ransom deadline, NSA extracted the complete decryption key set. At 4:41 a.m., NSA made contact with the Department of Health and Human Services, the FBI Cyber Division, and MedConnect Solutions. The message was direct. We have the decryption keys. We can restore your systems. Do not pay the ransom. At 4:58 a.m., working directly with MedConnect's emergency response team, NSA began pushing decryption keys to the 218 affected hospitals. The process wasn't instantaneous. Each hospital's systems had to be individually decrypted, verified, and brought back online sequentially to avoid cascading failures. At 5:14 a.m., the first hospital came back online. St. Michael's Medical Center in Newark, where the attack started, was the first to recover. Screens flickered back to life. Electronic health records reappeared. Medication systems unlocked. CT scanners resumed. The digital infrastructure was restored. At 5:47 a.m., 89 hospitals were back online. At 6:23 a.m., 174 hospitals. At 6:52 a.m., all 218 hospitals had recovered. The attack lasted 4 hours and 35 minutes. 0 hospitals paid the ransom. 0 decryption keys were lost. 0 data was permanently destroyed. But the damage had already been done. In 4 hours and 35 minutes of analog operation during peak flu season, 218 hospitals experienced elevated mortality across every department. ICU patients whose deterioration went unnoticed. Surgical complications from incomplete information. Medication errors from missing allergy records. Emergency patients treated without medical histories. Ventilated patients who weren't monitored in time. Final casualty count, 127 additional deaths directly attributable to EHR system outage. Another 410 patients suffered serious complications, permanent organ damage, preventable infections, extended ICU stays that would have been avoided with functioning systems. 127 people died in 4 hours and 35 minutes because their hospitals were operating blind. But the casualty count would have been catastrophic if NSA hadn't provided the decryption keys. Projected deaths if the ransom had been paid and systems restored within 12 hours. 45680 patients. Projected deaths if the ransom had been refused and systems remained offline for weeks. 18,000 patients. NSA intervention saved between 320 and 17,170 lives. The margin between actual casualties and worst-case scenario was 2 hours and 16 minutes. The time between attack detection at 2:31 a.m. and decryption key extraction at 4:47 a.m. And the attackers came within 11 minutes of receiving 50 million before their leverage was eliminated. Post-incident forensic analysis revealed the attack's sophistication. The malware had been dormant in MedConnect's cloud infrastructure for 6 months, collecting data on hospital dependencies, patient volumes, and operational patterns. The January 9th activation was chosen for maximum impact. Peak flu season, night shift staffing minimums, and maximum patient vulnerability. The dual-layer attack, destroying both digital EHR systems and paper record indexes, showed advanced planning. Most ransomware attacks focus on encryption. This attack targeted information architecture itself, ensuring hospitals couldn't fall back to analog systems. The attack vector was a supply chain compromise. 6 months earlier, attackers had compromised a contractor working on MedConnect's cloud infrastructure upgrades. The contractor's credentials provided access to production systems where the malware was inserted during a routine security patch deployment. MedConnect's security team never detected the compromise because the malware came from a trusted internal source. In the weeks following January 9th, the Department of Health and Human Services conducted emergency audits of all major EHR vendors. They found similar dormant malware in 4 additional healthcare cloud systems serving another 340 hospitals across 19 states. All instances were inactive, awaiting execution commands that NSA's disruption of the command infrastructure prevented from arriving. The January 9th attack wasn't isolated. It was one component of a coordinated campaign targeting healthcare infrastructure during its most vulnerable period, epidemic surge and resource strain. If NSA hadn't detected the attack at 2:31 a.m., if they hadn't infiltrated the command network by 4:32 a.m., if they hadn't extracted decryption keys by 4:47 a.m., then 218 hospitals would have faced an impossible choice: pay 50 million in ransom or accept thousands of preventable deaths. And even paying the ransom offered no guarantee. Many ransomware groups take the payment and never provide decryption keys. Some provide keys that only partially work. Others provide keys with embedded logic bombs that corrupt data during restoration. The decision to pay would have been a gamble with thousands of lives as the stake. NSA's intervention eliminated that dilemma, but it revealed something more disturbing. Healthcare infrastructure is a catastrophically vulnerable target. 218 hospitals representing 840,000 patient encounters annually were taken offline by malware deployed through a single compromised contractor. The attack cascaded from one cloud EHR vendor to 218 facilities across 11 states in 11 seconds. And the attackers demonstrated capability, patience, and strategic thinking. They embedded malware 6 months in advance. They timed the activation for maximum damage. They destroyed backup systems to eliminate recovery options. They calculated a ransom amount that was economically rational to pay. They came within 2 hours and 16 minutes of either receiving 50 million or causing 12,000, 18,000 deaths. The vulnerability remains. EHR cloud systems are still the backbone of modern healthcare. Supply chains still include hundreds of contractors with varying security standards. Flu season happens every year. Future epidemics are inevitable, and the attackers learned from January 9th. Next time, they'll target the detection systems. Next time, they'll eliminate the decryption keys immediately. Next time, they'll compress the timeline so there's no 2-hour window for NSA infiltration. Somewhere malware is being embedded in healthcare software. Somewhere contractor credentials are being compromised. Somewhere execution timing is being calculated, and 89,000 patients are in hospitals right now. Completely dependent on electronic systems, unaware that 2 hours and 16 minutes of NSA cyber operations stood between routine medical care and mass casualty event. The healthcare system didn't collapse on January 9th, but 127 people died anyway. And thousands more would have died if the digital darkness had lasted just a few hours longer. 14 minutes. That was the detection margin between attack start and NSA awareness. And next time, the attackers will try to reduce it.